All right, let's roll up our sleeves. We're going to look at the causes of discouragement, the cure for discouragement, but let's first of all look at the weapons of discouragement that the enemy uses. The first weapon we see in Nehemiah's story is ridicule. Watch how the enemy ridicules the people of God in these opening verses of chapter 4. And these, as you'll note, are the same guys we saw back in chapter 2, and we'll see them again. Sanballat, who seems to be the ringleader of the opposition. Sanballat was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the wall, Nehemiah writes. Then he begins to ridicule the people of God. He flew into a rage and insulted and mocked us and laughed at us. And so did his friends. That's, that kind of stuff's, it's contagious. And so did his friends and the Samaritan army officers. Well, what does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing? He scoffed. Do they think they can rebuild the wall in a day if they offer enough sacrifices? Remember in that last chapter, chapter 3, the priests had just finished dedicating the sheep gate. Do they think they can build the wall in a day if they offer enough sacrifices? And look at those charred stones they're pulling out of the rubbish and using again. I'll come back to that thought. Tobiah, who was standing next to Sanballat, tries to crack a joke. Well, if even a fox walked along the top of their wall, it would collapse. So the second weapon, not only ridicule, the second weapon of discouragement that the enemy used was resistance. Look at verse 8. They plotted. They plotted to lead an army against Jerusalem to bring about riots and confusion. That's what the enemy does. Now, the next weapon of discouragement the enemy uses is rumor. Look at verse 12. When the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. That was the rumor that the enemy had started among the people of Jerusalem. You see, the quickest way to spread a rumor is to feed on the fears of people, and the enemy knew exactly what they were doing. When we're tired, it's easy to get discouraged. And you've heard me say many times before that sometimes the most spiritual thing we can do is take a nap. Amen? And you don't think straight when you're tired. Look at verse 6. So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached how far? Half its height. For the people worked with all their heart. The work is halfway done. And isn't that usually when we get tired? When the project's half done. Does anybody have a project at your house that's halfway done? No, I don't want to see your hands. I'm going to cause a fight here this morning. The people are halfway there. The walls are half the original height. The gates are being restored. Look at verse 10. And then some of the leaders began complaining. Isn't that what we do when we get tired? Your kids do that, don't they? Well, you do that. Then some of the leaders began complaining that the workmen were becoming tired. Fatigue makes you vulnerable to discouragement. Some of you are tired today. I can see it. The next thing we see in the story is frustration. Look at the second part of verse 10. The people say to Nehemiah, we're in over our heads. We can't do this. We can't build this wall. There's so much rubble. They're overwhelmed and they get frustrated. And when things take longer than you think, or they cost more than you think, harder than you think, the more you become frustrated. And frustration brings discouragement. The third thing, I'll move quickly. The third thing that caused God's people to be discouraged was fear. Look at verse 11. Meanwhile, our enemies were saying, before you know what's happening, we'll swoop down on them and kill them and end their work. Not only are they exhausted, not only are they frustrated, feeling like complete failures, now there's the threat of being killed. That'll make you a little anxious. Here, there's a cure, there's a remedy. The first remedy we see in the story is to rely on God. Rely on God and rely on one another. After the enemy mocks and ridicules the people of God, Nehemiah's response to the attack was to pray. Ourselves. Second, when you're discouraged, it's important to reinforce the weak areas of your life. Nehemiah demonstrates this for us in verse 13. So I placed army guards behind the lowest part of the wall in the exposed areas. You see, the enemy will attack you where you are the weakest, the vulnerable areas, the exposed areas. And so Nehemiah posted guards where the wall would have been easy for the enemy to breach. Right there. Finally, one more thing. Refuse to quit. Refuse to quit. But if you give up, it's over. I love that the people of God in this story did not quit. Look at verse 15. Our enemies learned that we knew all about their plan and that God had frustrated it. And what did they do? In the midst of their discouragement, they rolled up their sleeves and they went back to the wall and went to work.